Hello, this is a quick demo of the Pivot Reports Builder web version. So uh, basically the module consists of the two forms, the pivots and the pivot setup. So the pivot setup is usually you give to the Pivot Reports administrator, who can then quickly set up all the necessary reports for the specific domain. And yeah, that's what we start with. So we have the pivot setup form where the very first thing you would need to do is you need to create groups in your domain. How you're going to group your pivot data sources. So it can be DCS reports if it can be by module, or if you're using just cost, you can group them by different type of data sources, related data. So for example, contracts would have data like contractors baseline, cost breakdown, milestones, variation orders, etc., etc. On the project side, you would have something like data used from the workback spread table, the time phasing data, either periodic or cumulative, the archives of the phasing, estimate, register, etc., etc. So the project level data and personal level accordingly. So this is something like I structure for the cost related information. I structure it by groups related to the type of data. So then after you've done that, of course, you need to set at least yourself or specific system group of users that will have an default access to the default layouts of all the reports created within that group. That can be an individual, because a system group can be a personal group, or you can just allocate a system group and allocate several users to that. That's maintained through the normal upframe security. Okay, after you've done that, then you can start either creating the reports. Then you switch to this Reports and Layouts tab, and you can either create it from scratch by clicking on the new report. It will assign an ID for you. You'll pick the groups you created, provide the title, and pick the data source. So for the data source, you can pick either the stored procedures and views as well. This lookup at the moment in the core version just searches through all the data objects in the database, but of course you can implement some custom logic to limit for the specific namespace, etc., etc. So you can make this customized lookup if the client wants. Okay, so this is how you would create a report. So if I fill all of those details, it will create a record here for me. What's interesting is that between the domains, report ID is maintained. So if I'm going to copy that report into another domain, it's still going to have this report ID 16, which is very convenient in terms of if you're having an issue, if you want to add a column or something, you can just then, users can reference to that report ID, just send you the link, and you'll be able to identify it very quickly. Okay. So what we see in this upper grid here, we see the domain. So by default, if I'm reloading the form and I don't have a domain field enabled, I just see, of course, the current domain data. If I click on Show All Domain, I need to bring the domain column, and then I can see across different domains. So I see the report ID here, the group it belongs, the title. You can change the title, of course, from here. And for the group, you can pick another one if you wish. Still, data source you can manage from here as well. This automatically shows you whether it's a view-based data source or a stored procedure. You can make a different sort order and parameters. So parameters are useful when you want to user before loading the data to limit specific set of data. So then you can make either required parameters. Required will mean that the user needs to provide them before loading, otherwise it will not be able to load the data at all. Or you can make them as not required, and then it's optional. But what's cool is that user can then also save the parameters he provides within the layout as well. So I'll show you how it works. Currently, at the moment, we have only 3 types of parameters: text, date, time, and number. But we're going to extend that further later to the record source, so you'll be able to provide a list of values as well. Okay. So when you created the report, automatically right away it creates a default layout for you like that and marks it as template. If I would create now completely a new report from scratch, I would have maybe something like that. I would have just one layout there and nothing there. So this starts to fill in when the users start to create the layouts themselves, and it's very easy then to see, for example, if somebody created the layout, you can just see who is the owner of the layout here. So that means that guy created the layout, but it's also shared with another guy here. So default, by default, will apply the permissions for the group you have. So anytime you will pick, let's say, and decide, oh, this guy created a very good layout. I want all of the uh, members who are in that group have the same layout available as a default. All you do is you click Use Template. So it's gonna then provide the permissions, the default permissions for these settings for that group where that report belongs to. Very convenient. You can also copy the permissions across. So if you define some custom permissions for specific user for specific layout, and you want also the same permissions for other three layouts in this for this data source, this is very convenient. You instead of just copy and pasting the stuff, you can just go in here, pick the from which layout you're copying this specific set of permissions, and you can say I want to copy it to this, and this layout as well. Okay, so the copy report function is very useful because we are planning on creating some global template default data sources which you can use as a start when creating new domain and easily copy, let's say, all the reports like that. But I would suggest also to copy it by the groups. So if I'm copying first contracts, in this domain, I would put it into contracts, but you might have a different group here than that. So it's not recreating the groups for you. It asks to which group you want to assign to copy the specific reports from another domain. And you can also click on copy all layouts. So it's going to copy default and non-default layouts as well. So that's possible. If you don't check that, it copies only the default layouts for you. Very convenient function to manage. So when you create the very first report, as I said, it creates only the default layout for you, and you can right away either click from here, or it will open the first default layout in the list, or you can copy a specific open a specific layout by clicking on the link there. So I'm gonna go into the default layout here, and that opens another application, which is the pivots application. So if I open it from scratch, there's nothing selected, and that's just it. But if I open it from setup form, in the parameters, it has passed me the report ID, the layout, and that I need to load the data automatically. So you can also share this link to the users within an email, anywhere, and by clicking on that link, considering they have the permissions to that layout, it's going to open and load the data. If, for example, the user currently was sitting in a different domain than the domain you gave the permission for that layout and report for him to use, he will be presented with a message that, hey, you have access to this report and layout, but it's currently in the different domain. And an example of that message would be something like, if I'm switching here to a different domain, it still tries to load that. It says couldn't load reports. It's in domain training. So then the user can decide, okay, I'm going to switch to training and try to reload that. That's all it's doing. Okay, so then I will explain all different features in the application here you have. So first of all, of course, you have the list of reports available to you and with specific groups. So you can search for a group personnel and it's just going to search for the group or the title as well. So when picking that report, it's also, of course, then loads specific layouts for you. So here, if I'm using that, this is the layout I have access to. So if I'm, of course, in that group and those layouts are default, they will be for everybody. But if this is, let's say, a layout which I specifically created, it's not going to be on everybody's list. And I'm going to show you an example of that as well. So here, let's say my new layout, and we're going to load the data. Yeah. And if I load the default, that's it. So what's interesting here, if we have a column chooser or field chooser, as it's called here, and you have different areas as a normal pivot. You have the filter area, which is on top there. You have the row area, which is here, and you can create nested levels, and the column fields as well, and data fields. Okay. Data fields is basically the data which you want to either sum up or do the averages, depending on what analysis of data you're doing. Yeah, different fields to choose. You can search for them. You can drop them to be available in the filter area as well. Then the next good feature comes in place is in the database, the fields are named sometimes not very user-friendly, so you would want to rename them. So you can go into column options by right-clicking on the field you want to change, and you can say that this is forecast, let's say periodic. Okay, you can also set the default width for the column. So that's going to be now called forecast P, but anytime it still shows you the original name for that column as well. So you can return that back. So here is as well, I renamed those to WebS1, WebS2, for example. I don't like this one as well. Let's say WebS3, something like that. Okay. You can move the things around. What's interesting is that if you're going to have, let's say, these are the fields coming from the data source. So there is a year field and the period field. But if I'm going to drop the date field in there, which is the cutoff, in this case, where is my cutoff date? Just a second. Yeah, here. Cutoff. So if I'm going to drop that into there, Pivot automatically creates the year quarter for you. So you can also do like that. The downside of it is that it always will do that. So if you just want to have years, you don't have that in here. So you need to create the year column in your data source. I'm going to drop that away, put the year in, put the period, and if you need quarters, you can also create that as in your data source, the quarter field if necessary. So I can put that into the filter area for now. So it's going to be available there if I need. If I need the 219 by quarters, that's it. And the 220 and so on. So there is also alignment, left, center, right you can do. So then you can do the different summary type for the value fields dropped in here. So you can do the sum, average, min, max values. Formatting is very useful for fields like, for example, cost. You want to have a specific decimal place, or you want to have it in thousands. There's also different possibilities here you can do. So this is like a guideline for you how you can use it, and you can change it here and then click enter. So if I put the percentage sign, it's going to be in percentage if that's what I want to see. Here now it defines it with a comma separator for thousands, but if I want to have decimal places in, I can then say dot like that, and it's gonna have, sorry, this probably the 0. Yeah, now it's gonna have decimals in for zeros as well. Okay, and if I'm gonna use the word thousands, just puts the K symbol in. Okay, then what else you have here? You can choose the cells in here by just clicking on them, and it should provide you the sum. Unfortunately, it doesn't do it when it's in this. Well, it does do it in the format K, but let me remove the format first. Formatting and make it as we used to have. like that. Okay. Yeah. Now it shows you the sum as an Excel for the selected cells, and you can do the average as well. This is very useful if you're analyzing specific, let's say, periods. You want to find the average burn rate for the last 3 months. This is just it. Just shows you that. If you want for the 6 months, just select the 6. Also very convenient. You can just click on the whole column. It also does that. Select the cells for you. But if you have nested levels, it's not going to do that. For example, for the row here, it's still going to expand it. So then I can do it here like that for the whole row if needed. Okay. Another useful feature is you might want to manipulate the total. So let's say if you have a data where you have, let me just reload that. If you have periodic data, it's quite useful to have on the side the grand total, of course. So there's another year I can add here. But if it would be cumulative values, then you can't sum them up like that. So you might want to don't use the column totals or the column grand totals. So that's used by right-clicking here, clicking on report totals, and then you can manipulate whether you want to see row grand total, whether you want row total for every nested level, or you want the column totals. If I'm expanding a year, it's still going to show me the year totals as well, for example, and the grand totals here. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to leave this layout, that total grand row total, and I can then expand into here and see the values like that. And I want, for example, to see here by period, and then the rest I want to see by the year. Okay, so the next cool feature is the chart. So how the chart works is you right-click anywhere, you click on the show chart, and then it works like what you select, it's going to pull the chart data for you here. So I can either then do, if I just want it by level 2, let's say here, I need, of course, again, to remove that because it will not allow me to select the whole stuff. And that's basically it. So I don't have anything for fiber optic cable in this case. I have something here, and then additional options are available on the chart, right-click. So you can have it stacked if you want. You can show the values. You can provide chart title, forecast by year. Here's the title. And you can copy that to clipboard if you wish. And if you're sending to somebody's email, you can just do that. If you don't like the size of the chart, you can always resize it to whatever is good for you. Again, just right-click, copy to clipboard, come back to your email, and that's how it's going to look like. Okay, this is in regards to chart. We're going to basically later add more different types here. You can also switch the value axis. This is very useful if you don't want to redo your layout and put these columns into rows into columns and columns into rows. So you can just right-click and say switch value axis. So then this becomes the x-axis, the WB axis, and it stacks it by years, vice versa, basically. So switch value axis. As you can see, quite a useful option here. Okay, what's important to notice is that if I'm going to save the layout now, it's not going to save the chart for me in the layout, because the reason is that every time there is changes in the data, it can load a different set of data here, and then the same cells will not be selected. So the chart with your provided title might not be valid anymore. So every time you need to do that on the fly after loading the data, you can then quickly select specific rows or columns to do that. Okay, the layout then saves all the properties. So whatever you're going to have, the alignments, the row totals, columns, namings of the columns, how you move them around, the formatting of the data, that is all saved in the layout. So if I like the layout I see at the moment, so let's say, let's hide the chart for now. Let's do like that by period. And if I like the layout like that, I can basically say save as new and provide a new title for that. If I have enough permissions, I can try to save the current layout, because if I was the owner of the initial layout, or if I am the pivot reports administrator, I'll be able to save the current layouts as well, which are the default, which might be the default layouts. So if I'm going to go back to the setup form for you and show you where it actually, how it works. So here the default layout has the following access levels. So it has the read access based on, of course, these group permissions I have here. And then there are some editor access as well, who can then edit this layout just by doing changes to the same layout. The risk here is that if any of those users are going to change that, it's going to be then for everybody who is having an access to that layout. So instead, every user has an ability to create his own layout, and if they found them good to be share them on the team, they can also just do the sharing here as well. They can pick the different reader or editor access and pick again the groups. Or if they decide that should become a default layout, then they should contact the Pivot Reports administrator, who will just go in here and say, oh, this guy created a very good layout. I want all the group to see that, so I'll just click Use Template, and that's it. That's going to be applied then for all the default members of that group. Okay, that's pretty much it about the Pivot Reports Builder. There's going to be some few tweaks added later, but that's it for now. Thank you very much.